I've been working on creating characters in ChatGPT and then using those characters as a replacement for the regular characters in the Rise scenario blocks. And I just want to show a little bit of my process here. So this is our patient, Miss McBrien, and all of the images that you'll see here have been created with the Plus version of ChatGPT. So I started by giving ChatGPT the style guide I'm working with, and it pulled out the brand colors and the general, type of photos that this brand likes. And then I asked it to create a header image for my course, and this is what it came up with. It's pretty good, although I'm guessing this guy was supposed to be like in a wheelchair, and it's just a regular chair. But when it's on the course, you don't really notice. So then I said the first patient is Miss McBrien, who is having a nosebleed. Generate an image of Miss McBrien, who is an elderly female patient and a wheelchair user. Miss McBrien has white curly hair, is wearing a dark red shirt, and is happy. Please use a transparent background. And this is what I got, which is pretty good. However, for the course, I didn't really want Miss McBrien holding a bloody tissue and looking happy. That was a little weird, so I asked to, get rid of the tissue. Well, now her fingers are kind of conjoined, but otherwise looks pretty good. At first, I asked it to create 5 images at once, and I guess it can't really do that, so I had to break this down. It just went with the first one, happy and smiling with her hands down in her lap. So now we've gotten rid of the weird conjoined fingers, and we just have a happy Miss McBrien. And then we have a picture of her holding a tissue over her nose. And then her just looking happy and off to the side. Her looking not so happy and off to the side. And this is like for a scenario where they're going to be talking to somebody. And then a picture of her talking and gesturing with her hands. For some reason, this suddenly looks extremely AI generated type face, right? So I say, please try again and get a better response here. But then I say, well, that one, she looks a lot younger. Remember to keep the age lines or wrinkles. And we get the best response yet, except for her hands look a little weird. So you could still tell that these characters are AI if you look really closely. But in general, we're doing pretty good here. So then I asked ChatGPT to create the background graphic that I'm going to use for the scenario. And gave it the dimensions of 2280 by 1000 pixels. Told her this is a room that is part of Naughty Pines. Remember the branding guide I gave you. Only include the room, the things in the room, but do not include the character. And then I wanted to try doing some images of the nurse, which is the learner in this situation. So I asked an image of a nurse putting on gloves, only show the hands, and then the same gloved hands holding a disinfectant wipe. And then the same hands washing their hands, but I still have the gloves on, so notice I'll come back to that later. And then the gloved hands throwing a tissue in a red biohazard bin, which looks okay at first glance, but when you look closer, this actually looks more like it says drawer lizard than biohazard. And then I realized by mistake earlier, we don't wash our hands with gloves on, so I said, wait, take the gloves off, and I get this image. So these are all of the images that I'm going to use in a Rise scenario block, which I built just using the regular Rise scenario block here. So I added my background, and it doesn't really matter what character you use, but I used Atsumi just because she's so common, and built out my scenario, keeping track of which one of the poses I am using on each screen. So I started out with neutral, and then I'm using stressed, surprised, disappointed, etc. It doesn't really matter which ones you're using because you're going to replace them all anyways. You just need to keep up with which one you are using and where. So in order to do that, because it started getting pretty confusing, I made myself a little spreadsheet. So neutral Atsumi is hand on your right hip, neutral face. You'll see why I made those notes in a minute. But for me, I wanted that to be Miss McBrien sitting happy in her chair. And then for the stressed posed, I'm using that for Miss McBrien who's having a nosebleed. Now here's where you'll notice for surprised, I'm not using a character at all. I'm actually going to put in that putting on gloves image. So you can put anything here. It doesn't matter which one you're using. You just have to use those poses from the scenario block and keep up with which ones are which. So then when I was done building it all out, I've got it how I want. I published it. Published the course. For this case, I went with web. And then when you download that and unpack it, you end up with a content folder. Under assets, you can see all the images of Atsumi, my intro video, the other images I'm using throughout the course. But what we're going to replace are all of these poses of Atsumi. In PowerPoint, I am just using a regular slideshow with blank slides, but I have turned it to a landscape I've turned it to a portrait orientation instead of landscape, and I popped in all of my images there that I just created. Now I have this one here. It's just one of the original Rise characters, kind of for scale, because I was testing to see if this slide size works. And it does. It's, again, just the regular slideshow size, but turned the other direction. So for each of these images, I needed to replace the Atsumi image. So here's my happy Miss McBrien. That was my Atsumi neutral. So I right click, save as picture, and in that folder that I just unzipped, under content, assets, I'm going to look at all these extra large and find the one that was Atsumi neutral. So this is why I had myself a little spreadsheet. Neutral is her hand on her right hip with a neutral looking face. So here we go. Now, click on that. I notice it changed the file name here. I'm going to click save. I do want to replace it. Yes, save as. So by the time I go through and do that for all of these, and I was changing the line to a different color just so I could keep up with where I was. By the time I go through and do all of those, then my graphics folder, looks like this, where they've all been replaced. I just have one or two Atsumi poses that I didn't use. They're still there. It doesn't matter. They're not going to show up. Everything has been replaced with the images I created in ChatGPT. And then when I open the index file, we can see that inside my scenario block here, I have the images of my beautiful Miss McBrien. And throughout, we have her in all of these poses that I created using ChatGPT. If I choose the wrong choice here, I get the supervisor looking very upset. If I choose the right choice, then I get the nurse putting on gloves. Now here's where I've ran into a bit of an issue. It seems like maybe this isn't the right size image or something, so I'm gonna have to play with that a little, or maybe just use a different idea, maybe just a picture of two gloves instead of a person putting on the gloves here. But in general, everything looks pretty good, right? Especially the images of Ms. McBrien. It's a pretty good size. Her hands are weird. I might go back and try to tweak that, but it's pretty good for AI images. This one turns out all right, the washing hands, but it looks weird because it would be like you're washing your hands right over the bed instead of in a sink. So I think I'm going to go back and change those. That idea didn't really work out, but I just wanted to show you that you don't really have to just use pictures of, a person with different facial expressions. So that's how I created a Rise scenario block with different characters, and you can create any manner of characters using the Plus version of ChatGPT or your favorite AI tool, or just by downloading character packs and then plop those in and have a beautiful Rise scenario block with different characters.